When you're buying a bike at the budget end of the scale, an important question is, should you go for a hardtail or a full suspension bike? Let's take a look at two really great bikes at the budget end of the scale, compare them and see which one is better value for money. It's often been thought that if you pick two bikes at a similar price, on the hardtail you'll get better components for your money, or you can make the decision that you still want to go for the plusher full suspension ride. So today I'll be comparing the Voodoo Hoodoo and the Calibre Bossnut, two really great bikes at the entry level that come with proper parts and geometry, and they're a world above the mountain bikes you can buy at a similar price level at non-bike shops. Let's start with the hardtail. This is a Voodoo Hoodoo that costs £600 new. Second-hand price to me was £375. We will get into that later on, the sort of second-hand value of these bikes and where you can find yourself some bargains. But this is a really good all-round trail hardtail. Aluminium frame, you've got branded components, you've got an SR Suntour fork up front with 120mm of travel. You've got Shimano Dior brakes and gears, a 1x10 setup. It's also super upgradable, so you've got stealth routing for a dropper post, because it doesn't come with one, it comes standard with a fixed seat post. This bike has 27.5 wheels, aluminium rims, plus more mainstream brands. You've got Maxxis Ardent tyres front and rear. Whilst of course the Suntour XCR fork is at the budget end of the scale, it is an air fork with rebound adjust and a lockout lever. Short stem, wide bars, it's a really capable trail hardtail. So, the full suspension bike is a Calibre Bossnut, £1,000 new. Now these are fairly legendary because they came with good components and with really good geometry for a really good price. So aluminium frame, 27.5 wheels, 130mm of travel front and rear. It also shares some of the same components as hardtail, so some Shimano Dior parts on it. This, however, if you're looking closely, is fairly upgraded. So this second hand was £600 and it's got all the upgrades you want. It's actually gone to 1x11 because the bike came new 2x10. It's also got a dropper post fitted, Hope brakes, and also a RockShox Reba fork up front, so that's bumped up to 140. All right, to give you guys an answer on which bike I think is better when it comes to choosing a budget bike, we're going to give them a score, and at the end we'll have a winner. So let's start with probably the most important consideration when it comes to buying a budget bike is value for money. So new, £600 versus £1,000, that's a pretty big jump in budget, and I would say they're both really good value for money. If you've got 600 quid, great, get yourself a hardtail. £1,000, great as well, get yourself a full suspension bike. So let's say that's one each for that. However, really importantly, when it comes to getting a bike second hand, which I think you should really consider, we got some absolute bargains with these bikes. They're both in really good condition when we bought them. 375 versus 600. Now, that is quite a bit closer. I know it's still a jump, but I would say try and find yourself the £600, because when it came to the Calibre, it came with those upgrades as well. So the ones I think would suit a lot of people, and it's changing it to a 1x11 and a dropper post. Plus, we've got some pretty swish Hope brakes in there as well, which I think has got to make it 2-1 to the full suspension. Okay, so let's compare a couple of bikes to see if it's true that you get better components on a hardtail versus a full suspension bike for a similar price. So on the Canyon website, I've got their Grand Canyon 7 aluminium hardtail, which goes for £1,249, versus their Neuron 5 aluminium full suspension bike, which sells currently for £1,559, reduced actually from £1,849, but still £300 more than the hardtail. If you look at the components, like I said, both aluminium framed, but on there you've got a SRAM SX Eagle derailleur on the hardtail and Shimano Dior rear derailleur on the full suspension bike. So different brands, but comparable. Take a look at the brakes, very similar. Shimano MT400s hardtail, MT410s on the full suspension bike. So actually, for £300 more, the components are very similar on the full suspension bike. All right, enough chat. I think I need to put these bikes through a few different riding scenarios. So let's take both of these bikes to where you think most beginner riders are probably going to take them to have some fun on a blue trail. I've ridden both bikes on the Blue Trail, now time to decide which bike takes the score. I suppose I'll be tempted to go with the Hardtail because it's fast, it's efficient, it feels direct, but actually, it's 27.5 wheels. It feels pretty rough, to be honest, on that trail. This bike feels so much more comfortable, there's more grip, and it hardly feels any less efficient. So, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to go full suspension bike, the points for the Blue Trail. Next challenge is to ride a black, not just a black, actually double diamond black, which is not the natural home for trail hardtail, but in for a penny, in for a pound. And what was kind of okay on the blue was having a fixed post, but on a black, it's gonna be a bit of a pain. So, but it's all downhill, so I can actually use my quick release, get my seat out of the way, because I think I'll need all the help I can get on this double diamond. Black trail points have got to go to full suspension bike. Definitely, the Calibre Bossnut is not the slackest by any means. Short travel bike, 130. So the head angle is around 67 degrees. This has been upgraded with the longer forks. It's 140 fork now. So it's probably somewhere like 66.5 now. So a bit slacker, but the steering still feels super quick, super direct. So feels great on the Blue Trail. Probably a little bit twitchy if you're going really fast, but this trail is rough. On the hardtail, it's got skinnier tyres as well, so I did have to pick lines around some of those bumps, whereas this got chunky tyres, way more forgiving, do some decent jumps on this as well. Full suspension takes the win on the Black Trail. All right, so it's 4-1 to the full suspension bike at the moment, but next I will be giving them a point based on the fun factor, how much fun they are to ride. So hardtails, brilliant fun. They, the way they feel direct, you can feel the trail. It's great, but it's also detracting sometimes if you're riding rougher trails. But for dirt jumps, pump tracks, hardtails are the best bikes. And this is all completely subjective. However, I'm gonna have to say, for what I wanna do, riding trails, trying to push a bit harder, do bigger jumps, then I give the point to the full suspension bike. Sorry, don't shoot me down in the comments, but I do think that bike is more fun to ride. Right, you've done the hard work, you've saved the money, you've bought the bike. Don't forget you've got to maintain the thing, especially if you live somewhere like the UK where it's horrible and muddy half the year. So full suspension bike, obviously there's more stuff going on. You've got bearings, 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs of bearings that will need looking after and replacing eventually. You've got a rear shock that has bushings that do wear out, plus they will need servicing. So they'll have an hour count. The manufacturer will recommend that after that you'll need to start servicing it, and for most DIYers that's something that you can't really do. You want to send that shock off, so that is quite costly. Bearings as well, you can learn how to change them, but there's still a price associated with them. Whereas if you head over to the hardtail, if you're maybe a heavier or more aggressive rider, then you might be pushing the tyres quite hard on these bikes, so you potentially might have to replace the tyre more often. However, they are, of course, way more simple. So the hardtail has got to win the point because they're easier and cheaper to look after. Right, according to my scores, a full suspension bike takes the win 5-2, but I still love hardtails. I don't hate them by any means. If you're riding blue trails, riding pump tracks, commuting, riding school, these things are amazing. But for me, I will always maybe save up that slightly bit more cash and get the full suspension bike. These are two great examples. Like I said, they're super upgradable. They've got routing for internal droppers. Maybe a slight tip of the hat to the Calibre because it has a tapered head tube, whereas a Voodoo doesn't. So you've got slightly more room to manoeuvre with upgrading the fork on this one. But like I say, if you're going to buy a sort of bike at the budget end of the scale, do your research, make sure you're buying a bike that's upgradable. When you're riding progressives, you can change things on there, and you're not buying one of these cheap bikes that is just kind of landfill. They're not fixable. You can't upgrade them at all. So Let us know in the comments down below, am I too harsh on the hardtail? And what bike do you recommend if someone's looking for a budget bike?